Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Wednesday, January 25th, 2017. I am Dave Biddle, very happy to be joined by the People's Champ himself, Matt Baxendell. Bax, we are exactly 1 week away from signing day. The question I keep getting is, can Ohio State catch Alabama for the mythical recruiting national championship? Right now, Bama has 24 commits. They have a 24/7 Sports composite rating of 310.84. Ohio State, of course, has 19 commitments, composite rating of 307.27. Ohio State's running away with the race as far as average star rating, which is what I care about the most. But in your opinion, is it realistic that Ohio State could catch Bama a week from today?
Well, you mentioned the average star rating, which, again, I think is the story of this class and any class. I remember a while back there was talk that Ohio State was putting together what could be the highest rated class in the history of 24/7 sports. Well, you know, when Bama has 5 more kids than OSU, the way you do these aggregating things, they may be ranked ahead of them, but they're in a technical fashion. But OSU has the most star-studded class in the country. They have the most top-end talent in the country. They have the most top-end talent I've seen in any recruiting class, compared to maybe going back to some of the USC classes Carroll pulled in back in the day 15 years ago. So whether or not they catch Alabama, to me, is almost irrelevant, just because OSU's already won the important part, which is how good are your commitments. You know, you see these kids, these schools finish in the top 20 and have 35 3-star players. That's the classic Tennessee formula, right? Ohio State's not doing that. They have the lowest number of the top 10 in terms of total commitments practically, but they have by far the highest average star rating. So if OSU goes out and picks up another 1 or 2 of these late targets they're going after, you know, then that's going to add to their score. But, you know, Bama's going to end up adding 2 or 3 more kids like they always do and hitting a very high number on signing. To me, I don't really care if 24/7's composite has them at 1 or 2. To me, the OSU class is the better class because the average star rating is just stratospherical.
Marvin Wilson, I know some Ohio State fans are holding out hope he might surprise everybody and pick the Buckeyes. It seems like an extreme long shot to me. Of course, the number 1 defensive tackle recruit in the country, number 6 overall. One good thing is you have 3 players from Texas, 3 of the top players from Texas that have already enrolled at Ohio State that are in the 2017 class, so that helps a little bit, but I just don't see Ohio State landing Marvin Wilson. What are your thoughts?
Well, the good news is he's not really looking at schools around Texas. The bad news is they asked him what he needs to learn from his coaches and stuff, and then home visit, and he asked, Urban Meyer, can I trust you? That's not a good sign to ask a week before signing day. So I'd love to see it. Don't get me wrong. I think that there's certainly a chance, but I don't think the Buckeyes are going to be favored at this point. And, you know, in the end, I agree with you. I think he ends up somewhere like Florida State versus Ohio State. But you never know what goes through one of these kids' minds. A lot of them are playing poker pretty well in terms of their choice just to get some excitement around it. And Urban Meyer does close better than maybe anybody in the country. So there's a chance, but I'm not optimistic either. I can tell you right now, if they land Marvin Wilson, they're going to beat Alabama in every measure no matter what.
Yeah, no kidding. That would be the one that would put them over the top. But unfortunately, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen. Another long shot seems to be wide receiver Oliver Martin. Looking at the crystal ball, 65% going toward Notre Dame, 30% going toward Michigan. Buckeyes got in late, kid from Iowa City. Obviously, he's not looking at the Hawkeyes. Looks like he's going to go to Notre Dame. What are your thoughts on Oliver Martin?
Well, I think right now anybody who's committing to Brian Kelly needs to double think what they're doing, because the second he has an opportunity to get there, he's gone. But I do think that Ohio State getting in late on this one is what hurt them. I took a look at this kid whenever there was talk about OSU chasing him, and he's a talented prospect. And I can tell him one thing, though. Young man, if you have to choose between Notre Dame and that School of North, the choice is always Notre Dame, as the great Woody Hayes would say. So I don't think the Bucs get him, and I hope he goes to Notre Dame just to keep him out of Jim Harbaugh's hands.
And then maybe he'll be up for a transfer once Brian Kelly gets canned, as you mentioned. We'll see what happens there. Not a long shot to be in this class is Thayer Munford, of course, the offensive tackle from Massillon. To my knowledge, still has not received the offer, but I think one is forthcoming. I think he will be a Buckeye. Your take on Thayer Munford, what do you think will happen there?
I think if he gets an offer, he's a Buckeye. I think OSU spent too much time buzzing around him to not take him. And I also think OSU You have to remember there at one point was another tackle in this class until Jake Moretti decided to stay back home at Colorado. They want another player, and unfortunately they haven't been able to get another player up to this point at that position. And I think that opens the spot for Thayer Munford. I think you can ask a very fair question of whether Thayer Munford's actually going to play at OSU, but maybe you can prove a lot of us wrong. I mean, the problem right now with our O-line recruiting is that after the last couple of years where you have a lot of these kids who have come here and kind of just sat here that were big, highly touted players, you have to wonder, is Munford going to get on the field if he's here? Or on the other hand, you have to wonder, is OSU not recruited well enough on the O-line, and Munford's the kind of guy who may actually find his way onto the field and make an impact. So, you know, he's not going to necessarily be the highest-rated kid in the class, but I think if OSU decides they need a tackle, they could do worse to get him.
Yeah, and he's not like a MAC-level player. I mean, he's got offers from, schools like Pittsburgh, Kentucky, Minnesota, Iowa State, not good Power 5 programs, but at least Power 5 programs. This is a kid that ranked as the number 30 offensive tackle in the country, ranked as a top 300 player in the country, number 279 overall by the 24/7 Sports Composite, the 14th best player in Ohio. I keep joking about this, but it's not really a joke back. If this was the previous regime, and I love Jim Tressel, Thayer Munford would have had like an offer 18 months ago.
No question about it. And under Tressel, there was always a couple Ohio kids that weren't necessarily top 10 Ohio kids that he decided he wanted, and he went and got them. Munford's absolutely a Tressel kind of pickup kid. But I will say this. If you're the 30th rated offensive tackle in the eyes of coaching staffs around the country, you're going to have better offers than Iowa. You know what I'm saying? Every school in the country takes 1 or 2 tackles a year, and if you're a top 30 kid, that means top 15 programs should be chasing you that aren't Ohio State late down the line trying to fill one more spot. So I think the difference between the evaluations from the scouting services and the evaluations from the coaching staffs of major programs around the country are very different. If Munford, in the eyes of all the D1 coaches, was a top 30 player at his position, you'd have had the Florida schools up here interested. You'd have had schools from the Pac-10, 12 now. You'd have had Oklahoma. You'd have had Texas. You'd have had, well, maybe not Texas. Texas doesn't come up our way, but you'd have had much more interest from places like Penn State. That's the thing. Is in today's recruiting world, Thayer Munford's the classic Michigan State should have been all over him from the start kind of player. So I hope that the interest from coaching staffs around the country isn't a red flag on Munford's rating from the scouting service. Let's put it that way. I think he's a good prospect, but again, the interest shown by coaches isn't what you would expect for a player who's supposed to be a top 30 tackle.
Let's close the show with some basketball chatter. Ohio State back in action tonight at home against Minnesota, 7 p.m. will be televised by Big Ten Network. Minnesota really handed it to Ohio State earlier this season in Minneapolis, but the Buckeyes are favored by 3.5 points tonight. I already tend to think the NCAA ship has sailed for this team. Now, maybe they can go on a crazy run and get back into the mix, but I just don't see it. They're 2-5 in the Big Ten right now. Tonight would be a step in the right direction, but your thoughts on tonight's game?
I'm not optimistic, but I haven't been optimistic about OSU basketball all season. That was literally the subject of the bucket for me a couple weeks ago. We're kind of watching the slow end of the Thad Matta era here. And I hate to say that because Thad has brought us so much joy and so much great memories and has brought in so many great players to OSU. But the truth is, this just isn't a good team. Like, the guys who are supposed to be your star players at this point aren't really performing like star players. There's just something that's missing. And even when they look like they're playing a pretty good game, they shoot themselves in the foot. And, I remember Thad Matta's teams used to hang their hat on defense. They would go out and they would defend the heck out of the game. They'd force turnovers, and they'd move the ball the other direction up the court quickly and get the fast break points. And, Thad's team this year, and honestly last year even, really didn't hold their hats on their defense. And, the last 3 years really have been a slow decline. I mean, you take D'Angelo Russell out of the equation here, and we're looking at 3 straight years of no NCAA tournament. That's the blunt truth. And they're certainly not making it this year. Like, I'm glad that you hold out hope for a Big Ten tournament run or something, Dave. I don't. I just don't see this team as having the players to come close to getting it done. And I think Minnesota's a team on the upswing. And honestly, at this point, I think Thad's trying, but I don't know if he has any answers. And I think tonight's just going to be another example, one of these games where, they're not going to get blown out on home court, but I certainly wouldn't bet Ohio State to win the game tonight. I mean, a 3.5-point favorite to me for this Buckeye team against any of the Big Ten teams that are tournament worthy is probably money thrown away at this point. And I hate to say that about my alma mater and a school and a coach in Thad Matta that I really like, but basketball right now is just, it's a long way from the days of, Deshaun Thomas and Jared Solinger. Let's put it that way.
Great insights, as always, from the People's Champ, Matt Baxendell. You can catch his column every Sunday. It is The Bucket. Thanks again, Bax, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great day. Let's hear some Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.